Hello viewers, and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. This is the very first of a new series of videos in which I'll review and discuss each and every Warlord we've seen released thus far, as well as their associated signature squad. Seeing as how Warlords compose the foundation of any deck, regardless of faction, I plan to start this series by covering the 7 Warlords we were introduced to in the core set, and then to work my way through each and every war pack of the Warlord cycle and all our upcoming expansions beyond. Considering that each Warlord has a unique playstyle that dictates how their surrounding deck is built and subsequently played, this way, hopefully all of these videos will remain relevant and useful for as long as possible. Each new release should simply build upon and complement the foundation laid out by each Warlord, as well as their respective signature squad. In this specific video, I'll be taking a look at the first Space Marines faction warlord, Captain Cato Sicarius, and focusing on the pros and cons of not only that warlord unit, but also each of the different cards of his signature squad. Although at the time of this recording we've seen the release of the entire Warlord cycle, in these first few videos I'll be exclusively covering the card synergy within our core set, albeit within the greater context of our first cycle of war packs. Once I've covered our first 7 Warlords, I'll be releasing separate, much longer videos for all the non-signature core set cards of each faction, and then I'll proceed to review, analyze, and discuss the content of each of our individual war packs in their entirety. This way, I should be able to produce a nice variety of not only short, Warlord-centric videos, but also much longer faction or expansion pack-specific productions. But, with that said, on to our very first Warlord of the Space Marines faction, the unique Warlord unit Captain Cato Sicarius, with the Soldier and Ultramarines traits. He has 2 attack value, 6 hit points, 7 starting resources and a starting hand size of 7, and reaction. After an enemy unit at this planet is destroyed, gain 1 resource. And importantly, on his bloody side, his attack value remains 2, but hit points are reduced to 5. Right off the bat, we can see that Captain Cato Sicarius is tied with many of our other core set warlords as having one of the highest base attack values of any of those units, although he's at the lower end of HP, particularly when flipped to his bloody side. But of course, when it comes down to picking a warlord, you're probably going to be much more interested in their ability, of which his in particular concerns generating additional resources. Important to note, it occurs whenever units are destroyed at his planet, not destroyed through an attack, so any kind of ability like area effect or some sort of direct damage, as we see from one of the cards that composes his signature squad, is also going to trigger this ability. By opting for a warlord that gives you resource acceleration, you can afford more expensive Space Marine units, you can afford middle and low cost ones earlier or in greater number, and during the command phase it can allow you to spend much more time focusing on drawing additional cards, as opposed to committing your warlord and army units to planets that would generate resource tokens for you. Something important to keep in mind for this warlord is that up until the command phase, he's going to be sitting in your headquarters. So if you take advantage of any number of effects during, say, the deploy phase that destroy units, such as the powerful Space Marines event Exterminatus, you're not actually going to be able to benefit from triggering his ability. I happened to mention before that he does derive the full benefit from area effect, so army units such as Tactical Squad Cardenas and Daring Assault Squad could potentially be absolutely fantastic in allowing you to destroy not only enemy army units, but also token units in order to generate as many additional resources as possible. Beyond his own signature squad, which I'll cover in a moment, there are a small number of other core set cards that synergize very well and complement Captain Cato Sicarius. Cards like Fortress Monastery, which provide an even greater resource acceleration effect through not generating additional resource tokens, but instead decreasing their cost so that turn after turn you can potentially focus all the more on winning those card draw focused command struggles. And although this Warlord's ability is very offensive in nature, if you find yourself continually running up against a very aggressive meta, it might be worth considering Iron Halo for inclusion in your deck, just because one time per round, although it doesn't allow you to take advantage of his resource acceleration, it does help prevent him from being assassinated or just pummeled into oblivion by a very heavy, powerful enemy unit up to once per round. Even if you don't happen to use the Iron Halo, since it is a relic which competes with an attachment introduced in his signature squad, it could nevertheless be useful in a shielding context. And the reason I make these videos is because I think it's important to consider as many possibilities as you can when you're trying to determine which warlord and which faction you're looking to play. But moving on to the first card of his signature squad, we have 4 copies of the army unit Sicarius's Chosen, with a cost of 3, 1 command icon, the Soldier and Ultramarines traits, an attack value of 2, a reasonable 3 hit points, and reaction. After this unit enters play, move a target enemy army unit at an adjacent planet to this planet and deal it 1 damage. So not only can this unit potentially win command struggles for you, but unless your opponent is willing to expend valuable shield cards, it can potentially snipe 1 hit point ranged units or command struggle winning units like Rogue Trader or Void Pirates. If you are able to take advantage of this effect to pick off those units, you can hurt your opponent's early game economy and keep them from accumulating extraordinarily valuable resource tokens and additional cards. But given that 1 command icon, a compelling use for this card might not just be to deny your opponent command struggles, but also to win some of your own. And in regard to what planet you want to deploy this unit at, given the context of his Warlord, it might end up in your best interest to really focus on card draw. Later in the game, this army unit can stay highly relevant in that it can pull away large or daunting enemy units from key battles, it could potentially soften up enemy units, or it could even kill a low hit point range target if you don't happen to have initiative or any ranged units of your own. It is important to note that this ability cannot target tokens, but all in all, this strikes me as a flexible, versatile unit, as well it should be, since if you choose Cato, you're stuck with having 4 of these in your deck. There are a large number of cards in the core set that I feel this synergizes particularly well with. It's a fantastic target for drop pod assault, not only because of its cost of 3, but also because this reaction specifies when it enters play, as opposed to when this unit is deployed or played from your hand. Likewise, it goes very well with veteran brother Maxos, who during the combat phase can put this unit into play, and you can take advantage of that ability once again, which allows you a unique opportunity to manipulate your opponent's position and dictate the location of enemy units across the battlefield. Harkening back to using this unit to manipulate command struggles in your favor, it's quite possible for you to reel in enemy units to his planet if an Iron Hands Tech Marine happens to also be deployed there, to potentially give you that small command icon boost that might end up making all the difference as to whether you draw 1 or 2 additional cards and/or generate 1 or 2 additional resources that your opponent might not be expecting you to have, just by leveraging those command icons in your favor. If you happen to be running any copies of the Holy Sepulchre support, it's possible that once this unit ends up being killed, you can bounce it back to your hand and take additional advantage of triggering its ability at least one other time. And through the use of that location, it is possible that you can benefit from the same copy of Sicarius' Chosen again and again and again. Plus, as an additional synergistic effect, since Sicarius' Chosen happens to have that soldier trait, if you're allied with the Astra Militarum, you could potentially dump a 2-attack Elysian Assault Team into play for no cost as soon as your opponent kills this army unit, and then you could potentially use that 2-attack value to dispatch an enemy army unit, or damage their warlord, or use that unit for any number of a host of different effects. I'll end my discussion of this card just by stating that, as with any Space Marines army unit, this is a perfectly eligible target for the Godwin Pattern Bolter if you're looking to boost its attack value and make it all the more effective against enemy flying units, and depending on your ally, you can either equip this unit with Ion Rifle for a large amount of additional attack, or hostile environment gear to bolster its hit points. Although that lattermost attachment might not be the best idea, just because you might want to benefit from this unit's ability as many times as possible, in having it repeatedly leave play only to be later deployed again. Our second card of Captain Cato Sicarius' signature squad is the 1-cost attachment, the Talsarian Tempest Blade, of which you only receive 1 copy, but it has 3 shield icons, is unique, has the traits Relic and Weapon, reading limit 1 relic per player, attached to a unique unit. Attached unit gets +1 attack and gains Armor Bane. So, important to note is that at this point, the Space Marines faction only has 2 unique units, namely Captain Cato Sicarius himself, as well as veteran brother Maxos. Although you have to have this card in your deck if you're running Cato as your Warlord, by being a relic, it does directly compete with Iron Halo, so you're going to have to carefully consider whether or not that attachment is worth running. It is important to keep in mind that at most you will only ever have 1 copy of this card in your deck, so while you may not draw it very consistently, if you do decide to focus on trying to win additional cards during the command phase, you might end up relatively likely to see this card after all. Of the 2 different options presented to the Space Marines player, I think the Warlord is the obvious choice for which to attach this weapon, just because it not only brings him to a respectable attack value of 3, but also serves the additional effect of disallowing your opponent from playing any shield cards. So Cato might be able to not only more reliably trigger his ability, but in doing so land the all-important killing blow on a large unit, or potentially 1-hit kill a smaller, nevertheless valuable or squishy enemy target. 1 attack value certainly isn't a very large boost, but gaining that Armor Bane ability is extraordinarily potent. This is an extremely cheap card, and even if you find yourself bringing an adequate amount of attack power to bear in order to continue racking up kills against your opponent, you can always consider simply expending this card for that enormous shield value. Later in the Warlord cycle, we'll see cards that benefit from your being able to reliably deal guaranteed damage to enemy units, and that makes that Armor Bane keyword that this card bestows all the more powerful. Still, even if you're only working within the confines of the core set, if you're looking to derive the absolute utmost benefit from that Armor Bane ability, you can take full advantage of 1 or more copies of the support Catachan Outpost, so that each and every copy of that location can give you an additional 2 attack value, and if you're desperate to search for this 1 copy card, and you happen to be allied with the Tau, the Earthcast Technician, beyond simply winning you command struggles, has the added ability to dig through your deck for various attachments, so that you can hopefully get this into your hand as early as possible and start racking up those enemy kills. The second to last card of our signature squad is another 1-copy card, the 2-cost support Cato's Stronghold, a location with the text Reaction. After an enemy unit is destroyed, exhaust this support to ready a target Space Marines unit at the same planet. So, I think under ideal situations you have Cato on a planet, hopefully equipped with the Talsarian Tempest blade, using that armor bane to kill enemy units with reckless abandon. And once one of those enemy units is destroyed, you can use that triggering condition to not only generate a resource token, but also to ready Cato once again and potentially kill another enemy unit. It is important to note that this can only be used once per round. You'll only ever have 1 copy of this in your deck, but it works fantastically well with him. You could opportunistically use this on any Space Marines unit, big or small, but it probably works best with either your Warlord or some sort of enormously powerful Space Marines unit. Something like a Land Raider, or even better, an Ultramarines Dreadnought. It is possible that your opponent can try to work around this card by deploying their units throughout the battlefield so that they don't have a large number of targets stacked on any one planet. It's also possible that they might stop playing low hit point value, vulnerable, and squishy units. And if that is the case, that cost of 2 might seem like quite a lot to invest in a card that isn't necessarily benefiting you right away or may not benefit you each and every turn, but hopefully, given that your Warlord is, under ideal circumstances, generating quite a few resources for you, you won't have to sweat that resource investment too much, although there are certainly many cases where you'd rather be spending those resources elsewhere. Really, the only other thing I can think of to mention with this card is, just like Cato's ability, it's after an enemy unit is destroyed, so you're completely welcome to take full advantage of area effect abilities. And all in all, I think this is a potentially rather potent support that could definitely have its own fair share of both early and late game uses. But last but not least, the very final card to round out Cato's signature squad is the 2-cost event, the Fury of Sicarius, with 1 shield icon. It is a tactic with the text Reaction. After a Space Marines unit damages an enemy non-Warlord unit by an attack, destroy the attacked unit. This has enormous potential in that it can allow even a single point of damage to destroy any unit in the game, regardless of the number of hit points remaining, regardless of the keyword, or any number of any other factors. But it is very important to consider that this only triggers off of an attack, not an area effect, which counts instead as a card effect. This event is something that your opponent must always be aware of and must always be afraid of, which has the added benefit of, even if you don't happen to have this in your hand, considering that there are going to be 2 copies of this in your deck, your opponent is always going to have to question, should they burn a shield card just to prevent a single point of damage? Even if it's a unit with a very large pool of hit points, even if 1 damage might not make any difference in the long run, just by merit of your opponent knowing that this might be in your hand, or is somewhere in your deck, might just convince them to spend or burn a shield card that they would never otherwise consider playing. and if you do happen to get your opponent to burn cards unnecessarily, particularly combined with playing Cato in a way where you're really using that command phase to deny your opponent card draw, this event could really help leverage card advantage in your favor. That cost of 2 certainly can be expensive at times, but considering the discrepancy between the cost of some large, powerful unit your opponent decided to play and the relatively small cost of this card, it can nevertheless provide what amounts to a pretty immense resource savings, and you could even play this card opportunistically, where even if you're breaking even, you're still manipulating the game state to be in your favor, and as with so many other Space Marines cards, this is just one more nasty combat trick that your opponent is going to hate to see. But that brings us to the conclusion of our overview and analysis of Captain Cato Sicarius and his signature squad. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel if you have not done so already, and leave your own personal favorite uses for all of these different cards in the comments below. Whether it's something I didn't think of, or something I overlooked, or something that you're particularly fond of, how have you been able to leverage Captain Cato Sicarius and his signature squad to win you games or win battles? What clever uses have you thought of for some of these cards? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and look forward to other videos similar to these reviewing the other warlords in the core set and beyond. And after that, I'll delve deep into reviewing all the different non-signature cards for each faction in the core set. So, as always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.